Welcome, everybody, to the Old Time Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for the Old Time Boxing Show, Mike Goodpaster. And right now, I want to welcome in, as always, my co-host, one of the best boxing historians out there, Christopher Shelton. How you doing today, Chris?
Good, Mike. Looking forward to the topic and doing this video-wise. George Chuvalo and Toronto boxing.
All right. And if you want to read a little bit more about Canadian boxing, Christopher put out 2 or 3 articles on thegruelingtruth.com. Feels like the cops are coming for you, Chris. Duck down and turn the lights off.
Turn the lights off. Okay, let's do that.
But today we're going to talk about Canadian heavyweight George Chuvalo, who is known as one of the best at taking a punch, fought some of the best fighters in the 60s and early 70s. Started off his career. He only had an amateur career of 16 bouts where he won all 16 by knockout, Chris. But this is another one of the heavyweights. I've interviewed a ton. Even George Foreman only had like 24, 25 amateur bouts, even though he did win an Olympic gold medal. Chuvalo had a short amateur career.
He's Canadian amateur heavyweight champion, and pretty much his entire professional career, as Americans would know, he would be the Canadian professional heavyweight champion. He still might be the Canadian heavyweight champion. I don't know who else seems to be it except George Chuvalo. Whether he fights or doesn't fight, no one seems to step in and take his place for that role from about 1957, 1958 to really 1977, 78. He was saying, hey, nobody else is heavyweight champion in Canada except me.
Yeah, and he started off his career with, I believe, 6 consecutive wins before he got beat by Howard King, who was a veteran, 34-10 at the Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. Then he continues on. He beats Howard King, stops him in 1958. And then really the first name that he fought was Alex Mitev, who is famous for fighting Cassius Clay. And against Mitev, he fought to a draw. So really, when you look at the first 20 fights of his career, there's not a lot here that would tell you this guy was going to have a career where guys like us 50, 60 years later would be talking about him.
Right. It's going to be really interesting to talk about him because you kind of brought out his strengths right away. He can take a punch. He's a tough guy. He fought great heavyweights, and that alone gives us something to talk about because we always like the other boxers as supporting characters. And he's going to have just the highest level of competition. He struggled, but when he just dropped it a notch, he was terrific. He was a fantastic boxer. If you weren't going to be a future heavyweight champion or a former heavyweight champion, he had your number. He really was a great boxer. It's just the high level we put boxers that are the top 10 in history and things like that. And no, he's nothing like that. But he beat everybody he should be for the most part. And then there's some tough guys he faced, the best, and those were tougher.
Yeah, his first notable fight to me would have been against Yvon Durrell, who's most famous for fighting the epic encounter with Archie Moore. He'd stopped, knocked out Durrell. Durrell was a light heavyweight, but really he starts to come into a little prominence, at least in Canada right there. But then he comes out and he loses to Pete Rademacher. So this is a guy in Chuvalo that I think really the first 6 or 7 years of his career, he was still learning how to box because he had such a short amateur career.
Right. I have to be honest, and I'm not picking on Chuvalo because I think it's going to be a fun interview. I think he was still learning to box, really to the very end. Seemed like he wasn't growing at times, and at times he started and did something different about. So he is an interesting person to watch, and without actually getting to see his fight, sometimes it's a little difficult to know what he do on XX day. But yes, he certainly was a presence. He was very popular with fans almost from the get-go, no matter whether he was popular going in or not. He usually would win the crowd over because he just keep going forward and throwing punches. Really looked a lot like a script for a Rocky Balboa type thing, except he's a bigger guy. He against a guy like Rademacher. Rademacher's an Olympic champion, decided he was going to fight for the championship first bout, got knocked out, fought Foley, second fight, got knocked out, and then started having a more normal career. And then he was a good boxer, and he can outbox somebody like Chuvalo still when they face each other.
Yeah, and after that, Chuvalo comes back. He beats Alex Mitev by a split decision. Willie Bezmanoff, he stops him. Then he loses a couple fights. And once again, it looks kind of down. And then he comes back. He gets a majority decision over Mike DeJean. Drew with Tony Alongi, who was a good fighter. And then you get the fight with Zora Foley. He goes to distance with Zora Foley, and we did a show a few weeks ago on Zora Foley. Zora Foley was a very good heavyweight, and to me, this is the first time where you see Chuvalo, and at least he looks like he's improved some, but Foley was just way too good of a boxer, too many skills to lose to a guy like Chuvalo.
Yeah. Foley was too experienced for Chuvalo at that time. I wouldn't mind just mentioning just a couple of those bouts before when he faced Pat McMurtry, I think his name is. That was in Madison Square Garden. Chuvalo's first time in America, and at the time, McMurtry was like number 5 in the world. He looked like he was really on a tear. And Chuvalo in the second round, nobody knew who he was in America, nailed McMurtry. I mean, really hits him hard as an Irish guy from America. And then started pounding around the ring a little bit. And it was very impressive, the first couple rounds. And then at that point, McMurtry kind of backed off, held his senses, held together, and won. Lasting the distance. And Chuvalo said himself, I partied a little hard. I wasn't used to America. I wasn't used to Madison Square Garden. Still, he made his presence known. And then against Mike DeJohn, it's another side of Chuvalo that I have to mention in the second round, pushing, shoving, and using his weight and being kind of dirty with the guy, pretty dirty with the guy, enough that he had 2 fouls assessed against him, basically 2 rounds taken. He was hit with for his conduct, which he deserved. And that'll be something to talk about as Chuvalo is, I know you actually have to cheat early on the professional level. I don't think it's anything wrong. I think you got to give somebody an elbow. You have to take your angles a little bit. But Chuvalo really pushed it a little bit. And with Mike DeJohn, it was nasty. But in the 6th round, he knocked him down twice. And he held on to get that win before moving on to Zora Foley. Zora Foley, a little too experienced. But it didn't seem to hurt Chuvalo. And he was still moving forward.
Yeah, and maybe one of his top fights was the battle with Floyd Patterson, who unanimous decision. But I think it was named, wasn't it the Ring Magazine Fight of the Year in 1965? But the fight with Patterson at Madison Square Garden, yeah, close fight. Could have went either way. I think it was 6-5, 7-5, 8-5 on the scorecards. But this is the fight where I think Chuvalo kind of, even though he lost, I think he put himself in the picture.
He absolutely put himself in the picture. I will say that I had a completely different perspective as far as just how you vote the rounds. I would say that I would put Patterson on 10-2 or something like that. I thought he won in a lopsided way in that sense. But the 2 rounds that Chuvalo looked good, I think it was the 4th and the 10th. It really excited the crowd, and the crowd was really, as in this case, they were rooting for the American. They were rooting for Patterson and Patterson's comeback. It's sort of forgot as the fight of the year. It's sort of gotten under the rug because Patterson did do well against Ali later on. But Floyd Patterson looked as good as ever, and really he was impressive because he boxed Chuvalo, and Patterson liked to slug it out, but he thought it wasn't a good idea against this guy. And for someone like Floyd Patterson with all his fights to say, I'm going to change my style for this guy, that's something in itself for Chuvalo. And I mean, to change his style and have to be brilliant changing his style. Floyd Patterson, this is really one of his greatest performances ever. And he needed all of it because he was dead tired taking on Chuvalo by the 10th round and sort of hanging on. But he was brilliant. And then Chuvalo, really won the crowd over because they thought kind of at any moment he can come on. And in the 10th round, he did come on and almost, Patterson was in real trouble. So it was an exciting fight. And the crowd was all Floyd Patterson going in, and about 50-50 when it ended. And I do think the decision, it was 10-2 or something in rounds, in my opinion. But the judges were disparate on that. Some thought it was a lot closer than that.
Well, I think there was a lot of rounds that could be debatable. I kind of agree with you when I watch it. I do see how somebody may be able to find a way to give Chuvalo 4 or 5 rounds. But I think there's no doubt Patterson won the fight. Now, Greg Gorecki, who is messaging us on YouTube as he's watching the show, said that George was the longest reigning heavyweight champion of Canada, exchanging the belt with Robert Cleroux, which I think he fought Cleroux 3 or 4 times, and Cleroux got the best of him in the majority of those fights.
Well, as far as we know in America, George Chuvalo was a Canadian heavyweight boxing. And I did want to point out one more thing on the Patterson round as far as the closer votes with the judges is that New York does give more points for aggressiveness. So just by being aggressive, that helps you in New York. And Chuvalo is certainly aggressive. So the same fight outside of New York probably has the 10-2 that I'm looking at. But inside New York, I could see it maybe being, closer if you're using that purely as a weight. I always think that's a little unfair to boxers, but hey, you know what? That's New York. That's the rules. That's what you sign up for, and you're told all that before you start the fight.
Yeah, then we fast forward. He gets a shot at Ernie Terrell for the WB heavyweight title, which is a made-up title at the time because we all know in 1965, Muhammad Ali is the heavyweight champion of the world. He fights Terrell. He loses by a fairly wide decision. I think it was 7 or 8 points on a couple cards. The other card had it by 4 at Maple Leaf Gardens. You want to talk a little bit about the Terrell fight?
Yes, and now this one, as much as the numbers might say something as far as was Terrell winning round for round, but I've got to admit, I think Terrell was ultimately very disappointing, and I thought Chuvalo was really coming on. He really earned the fans on this one because I give credit to Muhammad Ali boxed. He liked to back off, but he boxed. And Terrell looked like he was getting more tired. He was holding Chuvalo more, and he was bicycling. This wasn't just boxing. This was a little bit of a bicycle going on, and I think that if Ernie Terrell wanted to think he was a co-heavyweight champion along with Muhammad Ali, this performance wasn't going to do it for anyone. And the newspapers didn't hesitate to say there's only one heavyweight champion. He wasn't fighting that night. But for Chuvalo, I don't think it hurt him at all to keep being aggressive and giving Terrell a lot to think about in the later rounds. And I think for Terrell, it just I think it's sort of a all right, we'll get around to fighting Muhammad Ali, and then we'll see, where you're at. But I think for Chuvalo, it was actually a very impressive performance, although probably a lopsided victory for Terrell, just in how losing all of the early rounds would hurt Chuvalo.
Now, I do want to bring up one point. I forgot to bring up the George Chuvalo fight. He scored a major upset by beating Doug Jones at Madison Square Garden in 1964. And, I mean, this is a fight where Chuvalo floored the higher-rated Jones with a left hook in the 11th round. He ended up winning the fight by TKO, round 11 of 12.
Right, yeah.
This is one of George's best wins. Doug Jones was a quality opponent.
Oh, absolutely. I would rank in just immediately in my head, I would say the top 2 wins he ever had was against Corey and Jones, and maybe there's another one in there, but those are the 2. And Doug Jones, it was especially impressive, and I really had to say, I got to watch 3 fights in a row because Doug Jones fought in consecutive order. Zora Foley knocked down in the first round, knocks Foley down in the second round, and then it's just a terrific fight, knocks Foley out in the seventh round, and then fights Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, and loses the fight, but 2 of the judges' decisions were 5-4-1. That's as close as it gets. And it turns out Ali is a flaw. When he's backing against punches, he's not sliding. And that's really the weakness. And Zora Foley went after it not Zora Foley. Doug Jones went after it like kryptonite. He zapped Ali a couple times, nailed him for not moving when he backed off. So to then fight George Chuvalo and get knocked out, I was like, what the heck happened? But with Chuvalo, he decided to slug it out, and it really is a slugfest. It could have been fought like in a telephone booth or something. And Chuvalo got the best of it, and a very impressive win. Just incredible win under the circumstances for that three trilogy for Doug Jones, and for Chuvalo, absolutely, that's a credible win, and he needed that. You can't just be a fan favorite, you sooner or later you gotta get that win, and Doug Jones, that's a quality knockout win.
All right, now Muhammad Ali was scheduled to fight WBA heavyweight titles Ernie Terrell in Chicago, Illinois, on March 29th, 1966. However, about 6 weeks before the fight, Ali's draft classification was changed from 1Y to 1A, making him eligible for the draft. Ali, facing the possibility of being drafted in the United States Army during the Vietnam War, of course, created a huge uproar by famously saying, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." He was called before the Illinois State Athletic Commission to apologize for the unpatriotic remarks. Ali appeared before the commission February 25th, but he refused to apologize. Immediately after, Illinois State Attorney General William G. Clark declared that Ali fighting Terrell would be illegal. He cited violations of the Illinois Exhibition Act and the Illinois Boxing Act. So George Chuvalo gets his shot against Muhammad Ali on exactly 17 days' notice, Chris.
Yeah, it would be tough for Chuvalo under absolutely any circumstance to take on that particular Muhammad Ali at that moment in history. And 17 days' notice, pretty much an impossible task. But he did do something that Muhammad Ali hadn't done. 59 minutes in the ring, and I'm including the 1 minute rest. So for 59 minutes. He was there with the greatest, and after 59 minutes, he's standing there afterwards in Toronto, and the fans were excited about that. And some of the dirty and the roughhousing seemed all right because he's landing body punches, at least on Ali. No one's really landing body punches against Ali. I mean, really, you grab, kind of pushing him against the ropes and landing body punches, and that's not really so dirty to me. I mean, you gotta be able to do something. You got to be able to close the ring, at least on Ali. But yes, I think it was impressive. I thought the judges, I mean, to say they were generous, they were Santa Claus, giving Chuvalo 3 rounds and 2 rounds that were tied. I think he lost all 15 rounds. But I do think Chuvalo was winning over the fans, and I think it's exciting to see Chuvalo keep going and going and going and lasting the distance. And it really gave Chuvalo his fame. And then meanwhile, the 1965 fight of the year against Patterson sort of is forgotten about today. Chuvalo says the only one asked about one fight, the first fight against Ali, although we'll talk about the second one later on, much better fight. But this time around, this is the one that gave Chuvalo his sort of permanent legacy.
All right, Steve Golden says Ali was a sticky move fighter. Doug Jones was a bum. Bum of the month. Ali beat the expletive out of Jones. Now, I will say this. Thank you for the comments, Steve. Thanks, Greg, for the comments earlier. I think any man that steps in a boxing ring professionally can never be classified as a bum. I think Doug Jones was a damn good fighter. He was a light heavyweight, basically. He went the distance with Ali. I do think Ali beat him, but there is no way he beat the crap out of him, Chris.
2 judges called it 5-4-1. And I mean, it could go 5-4-1 either way. That's how close it is. And in the first round, and the hardest, the best round was the first round. Doug Jones, could you give him a 2-point round? No. They're just giving somebody a round. But could you? No. But Doug Jones hurt Ali. Ali didn't hurt Doug Jones. He was Cassius Clay at the time. So it was very impressive. You know, to knock Doug Jones is just he made decisions when he fought Foley the first time. The second time looked better. And when he fought Ali, he really had Ali's number. I mean, he was ready for the Cassius Clay. I mean, he was ready for this Olympic champion. And then against Chuvalo, I think he just early on thought, I can't slug it out with this guy. It was a mistake. But Doug Jones a bomb. Oh, heck no. Doug Jones is just one of the great ones who probably maybe should have got a chance against Muhammad Ali when Muhammad Ali was champion. He got a shot against Ernie Trell, but that doesn't feel like a championship fight, though. It is what it is. And Doug Jones is you and I'll speak up for him. And hey, as I said, 5-4-1 either way, in my opinion, and certainly not a bum. A great fighter in the middle of quite a few of those great fighters.
All right, now, after the Ali fight, George Chuvalo loses to Oscar Bonavita by majority decision. And this is a fight that, when you look at it, could have went either way. When you look at the sports writers who scored the fight, Bonavita did claim to be the only man to knock Chuvalo down, which in the 4th round, Bonavita drove Chuvalo back on his haunches with a series of rights to the head. And I know the UPI said that Chuvalo might have hit the canvas, but this was a close fight that could have went either way. But in close fights that could go either way, it seemed like Chuvalo, more often than not, came up a little bit short, Chris.
Yeah, and I would even give Bonavita a little bit larger lead if I were just giving it by round per round. And at the same time, it's a very impressive for Chuvalo because Oscar Bonavino knocked down Joe Frazier twice when they faced each other the first time. And this is an Oscar Bonavino who was not really engaging with Chuvalo. This is a guy who likes to engage with heavyweights. He likes to step forward. He likes to throw punches. He did not do it, which was probably – what happened to Doug Jones is probably smart. He actually tried to box, stay away from him, try to be a little more athletic, not exactly bicycling, but certainly just trying to box a little bit more with Chuvalo, which was a good decision, but impressive that he had to change his style and basically who he is against Chuvalo. And then toward the end, Bonavita's tiring. Chuvalo's tiring too, but it's not so obvious that Chuvalo's tiring as when the guy's who's athletic is slowing down, has to grab, has to hold a lot more, kind of doing what he can. So Bonavita looks a little bit desperate toward the end, but I think he won, and again, he had to change his style for Chuvalo.
Yeah, and over the next year, he fought probably 10 or 12 times. The most notable was against Willie Bezmanoff again, who he fought back-to-back, stopped him twice, and then he gets a shot at Madison Square Garden against the 16-0 Joe Frazier, Chris.
Yeah, that one. You know, I watch a lot of these heavyweights, and I got to say, watching Joe Frazier, because I watched it silent, and I mean, it was painful to see Joe Frazier hit. I mean, Joe Frazier hit. I mean, their two are standing in front of each other, and Chuvalo's a bigger guy. It appears he's a stronger guy, but Frazier's just hanging in there. He's not easy to hit, and when Frazier hits you, man, he just gets the leverage. The leverage is incredible when he hits you to the like this. God, I'm hurting just watching Frazier's shots. When Frazier and Foreman hits, Foreman, you could tell he hits hard because the guy's locked loopy, but Frazier, you could just sort of feel it, you hear it, even though I'm listening on silent and I can hear Frazier's punches. And Chuvalo actually, I think in the fourth round, actually starts to, like usual, he starts to have a good round, a good moment, and excites the fans a little bit. And then Frazier's just pounding and pounding and pounding, and in the eighth round they stopped it. And it's really fun fight to watch though. And to take those punches from Joe Frazier and say, all right, I'll go back against whoever's next. That's Chuvalo again. It's because the amazingness of just I'll go up against whoever. I mean, he was willing to take on everyone. Now he lost against the best, but he also beat everyone else who wasn't the best.
All right, now Mark Cram from Sports Illustrated wrote a paragraph about this fight that I think explains this fight perfectly. He said the fight was supposed to be a war, but it never had time to develop. By the second round, Chuvalo's face was smeared with blood as hook after hook banged into the right side of his rock-like head. Between the second and third rounds, the face turned purple. The third was Chuvalo's best round, but he still didn't win it. Chuvalo's right eye was closed when he came out for the fourth round, and he said later he was dizzy. Two heavy hooks by Frazier ended the fight after 16 seconds. Chuvalo turning his back on Frazier and groping for his corner. A blood vessel leading to his eyelid had erupted. Chuvalo later said, "I thought my eyeball had been knocked out."
Oh yeah, absolutely. Chuvalo's head and face is a mess, and that's in an oddball way. It's fortunate. It's fortunate to see visually what's happening to Chuvalo, because he's also taking a lot of body punches, and the body punches aren't so obvious. So to keep this thing going in any way, they did the right thing. He had to stop this fight. Frazier's he's just hitting too damn hard, and Chuvalo's taking these punches, and he just can't do much against Frazier. The hand speed of Frazier is too incredible. The defense against Chuvalo is just so much better. It's Frazier being amazing. There's a reason this guy is one of the best in history, and that Chuvalo again fought him, wasn't afraid of him, looked bigger and stronger, and against something like Frazier, tough night, tough beating he took.
All right, then the Buster Mathis fight, which is a fight, if you get a chance to watch it, I would definitely say go watch it. You can actually watch it on our Facebook page or our YouTube also. But this is a fight where in the first round, both guys could have been, disqualified. Mathis was enraged at some low blows in the opening round. He charges at Chuvalo to retaliate, twice shoved referee Harold Vallon
picked him up
and attempts to return the fouls. Mathis later would calm down and methodically chop Chuvalo down, cutting him over both eyes, raising a huge lump on the fighter's left cheek. And in the 11th round, a right lead opened a deep cut on the corner of Chuvalo's left eye, and that wound pumped blood for the rest of the fight. This was a brutal fight, and once again, Buster Mathis just had too much skill for George Chuvalo.
He had too much skills, and it is a really incredibly dirty first round. It is begun by Chuvalo, but nonetheless, Buster Mathis starts just openly, blatantly cheating. He said later on, well, the guy kept saying, I'm sorry, and then hitting me low again, and I got sick of it. But Mathis is a class guy. I really liked the way he speaks, communicates, and for Buster Mathis, just to let the audience know, if they don't know, he beat Joe Frazier in the amateur finals. He should have gone to the Olympics as our heavyweight example, but he was injured and couldn't. So he loses that type of fame and attention, and then he only lost one fight going into that fight against Chuvalo, and that was against Frazier, and he gave Frazier a heck of a battle before Frazier was the first person to knock him down. So I would say both of the Pack of Mercury, who was number 5 when he fought and defeated Chuvalo, and Buster Mathis, after Buster Mathis appeared to beat him easily once he started boxing, but those two are never the same again. I mean, that's not an exaggeration, that they went from a great fighter to really couldn't fight again, and when they tried, got beat up and knocked around easily just after fighting Chuvalo. And now in Buster Mathis' case, he also had to face suspension because I don't care what Chuvalo did to you. You cannot pick up the referee and toss him around. You just can't. It's crazy to watch. You go, oh my God, he just picked up the referee and threw him. He had disqualified one, both of them. Honestly, I got to say the referee. I guess I'm glad he didn't disqualify them both, but really, should have.
All right, and then we get to one of George Chuvalo's greatest wins, maybe his best win, and that was the 7th round stoppage of Jerry Quarry, Chris. Good fight. Debatable whether it should have been stopped when it should have been stopped, but there's no doubt Chuvalo won this fight.
He did, and this time, this is the George Chuvalo. Sort of like when Patterson fought Chuvalo. You're like, Chuvalo went in with a jab. He would not let Quarry, and Quarry had to box to gain the advantage over Chuvalo, which he appeared to do as time was moving along. He struggled a lot with Chuvalo because Chuvalo never uses his jab, and he was jabbing away. Then you're thinking, why doesn't Chuvalo use his jab more often? Because he looked terrific with his jab. He's hurting Quarry, but Quarry, as a thinking man's pugilist, Quarry is, sometimes with Quarry and Chuvalo, they're stuck in the two white guys thing and stuck with that sort of thing. But they're different fighters. They're totally different. And Quarry's a much better boxer. But Chuvalo, Quarry wasn't expecting the jab. Quarry wasn't expecting Chuvalo to sort of change and alter the attention and pace. Both were beat up. Quarry probably had the advantage. Chuvalo knocked him down. And then Quarry, bizarrely, didn't seem to understand the rules that, hey, when they said there's a time limit of getting up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and Quarry seemed to think he had an extra second. He could have stood up at any time. I don't understand why a boxer doesn't stand up, but he didn't. He just waited until he thought was the right time, and he was 1 second too late. I mean, what can you do? Yeah, you have to stop the fight. You lost. You have to get up by a certain time, and you didn't. I think it was the announcer in Dunphy's like, you can't stop the fight on something like that, but you have to. He didn't get up fast enough because Quarry didn't know the rules somehow by 1 second. But a great win for Chuvalo, and he did knock him down. He thought his way through the fight. He got beat. This time he really took a beating from Quarry, and he gave Quarry a beating. It's a hell of a fight, and for people if they want to see these things. And it's not just the two white guys facing each other. It's two great heavyweights facing each other. Period. And Chuvalo again with Doug Jones. I think it's those are the two greatest wins of his career, at least in my opinion.
All right. Then he makes the mistake of fighting a young George Foreman, August the 4th, 1970. And the thing that was impressive to me is this fight stops in the 3rd round, and Foreman seemed to be landing punches at the rate of like 1 a second. He kept going for like a full 40 or 50 seconds and just absolutely dominated Chuvalo until Chuvalo's manager, I think it was Irvin Ungerman, mounted the ring steps and ended the slaughter.
Yeah, the referee didn't even see that quite fast enough. Now, I guess it does sort of make you wonder a little bit because Chuvalo's big claim to his legacy is he never got knocked down. Well, if his own corner had stopped it before the end of the 3rd round, he was going down. This was not just taking a beating. I mean, Foreman, he's barely holding onto the ropes. He's barely hanging on, period. And nonetheless, I will say for Chuvalo, there was a 4-year period where no one reached the 3rd round against George Foreman, and that includes Frazier. That includes Norton. You couldn't even get to the 3rd round against Foreman. And Chuvalo, he got to the 3rd round and then took a terrible beating. And absolutely, his corner did the right thing trying to stop this thing. And they couldn't get the referee's attention fast enough. He's taking a further beating. And yes, all it needed was another 3 seconds, and Chuvalo would have went down. But he didn't. The fight ended with a TKO 3rd round for Foreman, and it's okay. If Chuvalo has he never got knocked down, but if it means that much, but that's a tough one. And George Foreman, just one tough customer. Now I sometimes want to watch those old fights of George Foreman versus whoever the chump. Now that's the chump in the sense that I feel bad for them. I wouldn't want to go against George Foreman, never in a million years, because you're gonna get your ass handed to you in probably less than a round. He's gonna beat the blank out of you. You beat the blank out of Chuvalo, you beat the blank out of Frazier, you beat the blank out of Norton, and I swear when he's going to fight Muhammad Ali in Zaire, he's going to kill Muhammad Ali. He's going to kill him. That's how tough George Foreman is. But this was two tough guys, but Foreman, man, and Foreman's a smart guy. He's a boxer. He knows what he's doing. He's not only hitting Chuvalo, but he's watching what he's doing. He's going for the not even just the finish. He's really just thinking the next punch, the next movement, the next thing to do. Foreman's a smart guy even back then. He's just so powerful that guys weren't lasting long. So it sort of looks like, oh, he just throws a punch and knocks somebody out. He could do that to me for sure. One punch and I'm out. But these tough guys, he's throwing a few more punches than that. But nonetheless, they were out. And Chuvalo was, oh man, that was a beating.
All right. Next up, he goes back to the Maple Leaf Gardens, fights what I think we could consider an elite heavyweight at the time, Jimmy Ellis. Definitely a top 15, top 10 guy during this time, which may have been the greatest in heavyweight boxing history. And Ellis is he's outweighed by 25, 30 pounds, but he's just a faster fighter. And he dominates the first 7 rounds or so. And then Chuvalo comes on, I think, and fights strong the last 3 rounds, but it's too late. Ellis gets the decision.
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely how I would see it too. Jimmy Ellis is just unfortunately in one of those positions, and are we ever going to do a show about Jimmy Ellis? No, because we don't want to do it. Nobody wants to watch it. That doesn't mean he wasn't a great.
I want to do a show about Jimmy Ellis.
Oh, well, then you know what? We'll keep that in mind. Anyway, Jimmy Ellis really is a great heavyweight boxer and such, and he does dominate through boxing against Chuvalo. But Chuvalo is wearing him down, slow but sure, because Jimmy Ellis stays focused, and he's tiring. He's tiring fast. And in the 8th, 9th round of a 10th round bout, Chuvalo starts pounding him around, and the knockout's not necessarily out of the picture. And again with Chuvalo, if you ask me, he lost against these major fighters, and I think he really lost most of the rounds. But this is another fight that when it ends, Chuvalo has nothing to be ashamed of. And if it had gone a couple more rounds, Jimmy Ellis is in trouble. So yeah, it's a quality loss for Chuvalo if that's possible, as usual. And for Jimmy Ellis, just a great fighter. And yeah, we will do a show. I didn't know for some reason, everybody's on the Debbie Downer with Jimmy Ellis sometimes. So, but quality opponent for Chuvalo, that's for sure.
All right. Chuvalo beat Stephen Williams, which if this would have been 10 years sooner, would have been a great win. The reason I bring this up is this is a fight that was much closer than what it should have been. And I think it shows that Chuvalo was a limited boxer. I mean, he was a tough guy, but every fight was going to be issues for him just because of a little bit of lack of skill that he has, to say it as nicely as possible. But I think the unofficial AP scorecard had Chuvalo winning 97-95. On the judges, I think it was anywhere from 3 to 5 points. But I think what we see here is not just so much that Cleveland Williams is 10 years past his prime, but maybe George Chuvalo's getting there too.
That I love that. I like exactly the way you said that. And I actually liked what you hinted at, which I probably would have said it at some point here is, hey, Chuvalo doesn't grow as a boxer. He actually sucks as a boxer. Actually, I've grown appreciation for some of the things he did try to do in some of these fights. So I hate to say it so roughly. I would have said it that roughly sometimes. I want to say it that roughly sometimes. For a guy who has as much fame as he has, he didn't seem to be growing at times as a boxer. But then he does have moments here or there. So I think it is fair to say sometimes that this guy was a tough guy and sometimes very limited as a boxer. But he did think a little bit more than I would have thought at certain times. And against Cleveland wins, it's a win. And 10 years earlier would have been maybe fun to watch the fight only because what we have in history and stuff. I don't know what the fans would have thought about it because Williams lost his reputation by getting knocked out by Sonny Liston twice and then faced Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali battered him around so easily, knocked him out in the 3rd round that really Cleveland Williams doesn't even have a reputation anymore. Unfair because Cleveland Williams against Chuvalo would be a great fight, 10 years earlier, and it didn't happen.
10 years earlier, I think Cleveland Williams might beat him.
Yeah, absolutely. This is again I appreciate when the people, that's what boxing is. You either are the best or you're bummed. I hate to do that, but that's the way it is. And Cleveland Williams has to face that, and Chuvalo somehow in many ways survives it, but not necessarily. There's a lot of people that say, "Hey, this guy's overrated." All these people do when he was boxing, and now everybody's a Chuvalo fan. The guy's overrated. I don't know about that, but I would have been tough on him at times. I still think he sometimes is hot dirty. I still sometimes think bad record against great fighters, but nonetheless, quality win's a quality win. And Cleveland Williams is 38, he's 34, and I agree with you. It's one guy who's past his prime, another one who, if he's not past his prime, who knows? It's just because he never looked that good as a boxer. It wasn't that obvious that his skills were deteriorating. In fact, he looked like he was getting better.
Well, then he got a rematch against Muhammad Ali, not for the title, it was for the NABF heavyweight title. Ali predicted he would drop Chuvalo, who had never been knocked down. And the pattern of the fight was established from round 1. Ali did dominate the fight, but he absorbed a big right cross. I think it was in round 5 when I rewatched the fight. And Ali just stood there in the corner for about a minute and dared Chuvalo to hit him. And then in the 6th round, I think Ali was trying to stop Chuvalo. He let fly with pretty much everything he had. He did jolt Chuvalo with a series of combinations, but Chuvalo wasn't going anywhere. This was, to me, a more competitive fight than the first fight.
Absolutely.
But in the end, George Chuvalo, all I can say about him is if you can stand 27 rounds with Muhammad Ali in a ring, you're a tough dude.
And if you could
you've got to have some skill to be able to do that.
If you could stand watching 27 rounds of these two guys fight, then you must be doing a show like us. But I got to tell you something. I wanted to avoid the second fight. It's like, oh, why would I want to watch it? Nothing's going to happen remotely interesting. And yet Chuvalo said an interesting thing, which turned out to be true. He said, yeah, but 6 years earlier, Muhammad Ali was a better fighter. And 6 years later, I'm now a better fighter. And you can see that. Chuvalo is cutting off the ring better. Ali is getting hit more. It is a more competitive fight. Enough that I think what Ali was doing in the 6th round was dangerous. I think he wants to knock down Chuvalo. And he's giving everything he can. But that could be dangerous. You could burn out even if you're the greatest. And he couldn't knock Chuvalo down. It is a fun fight to watch. Chuvalo even finally says at a certain point when Ali's backing off, I'm going to stay in here. You want to fight or not? Sort of. And it's a lot funner a fight than I think people who say, oh, shit, I don't want to watch the second fight. The first one wasn't even that good. The second fight's better. The second fight's fun. And Muhammad Ali trying to do everything he can to knock Chuvalo down. That's dangerous. It's fun for the fans. And it's more fun to fight. A funner fight to watch than a person might think. And Chuvalo's last loss.
That's pretty much the end of his career after that. I mean, he fought a bunch of guys that were right around 500. He finished his career with 7 straight wins, and he finished his career in 1978 by beating George Jerome for the Canadian heavyweight title. George Jerome was 11-8 or 11-12. Earl McLee was before that, who was 8-7. Bob Felstein, who sounds like a lawyer, was 16-12. Those were his last 3. He won the vacant Canadian title over Felstein, defended it twice, then he retired. And I know he had a lot of personal tragedy, and still to this day does, because I know he's suffering from, a little dementia. I don't know if there's such thing as a little dementia, but we do not really want to touch on that. We just wanted to talk about the fighter in and of itself today. And I think
I'll throw in of the after Ali, he did retire. He did retire and stayed out of it for about 4 years. So it's a little dangerous, that final comeback. But I sort of looked at it, and he only fought like 3-4 times, not that many rounds in the ring. It doesn't appear he did any additional damage by that comeback. It was a really bad decision. He could have, made things much worse. Really bad decision to try to make a comeback like that. His former people that worked with him wouldn't do it, but it didn't appear that he sustained any more damage in that final comeback, which I think was 4 wins, 4 knockouts, something like that.
All right, Chris, anything else we want to bring up before we wrap it up?
Just to say again, I got 3 stories out there about the 1880s Toronto boxing scene. People like Moriarty, Billy Hawkins. Billy Hawkins, a great lightweight. Paul Patillo, Harry Gilmore. A lot of great Toronto boxing in the 19th century.
All right, Chris, who do we want to do on our next show? Jimmy Ellis?
You want to do Jimmy Ellis? Hey, can I ask you?
Jimmy Ellis.
We'll do Jimmy Ellis, and can I ask that fight, the fight between Pritchard Colin and Tyrell Williams, to kind of look at it as an underside, because it's a fight that I think a lot of people seem to be avoiding and throwing under the carpet a little bit. I mean, Jimmy Ellis will be the topic, but I wouldn't mind just talking about that too, if that was okay.
Yes, we can do that. So we'll be back in a week or 2 for old time boxing. So make sure you check out all Chris's articles on thegruelingtruth.com. You can follow me at Grueling Truth. And remember, in about an hour, live at 4 o'clock on Facebook and YouTube, Inside Boxing Weekly will be back with myself and the managing editor of Max Boxing. Also wrote Blood on My Notebook, which is a great book. I highly recommend. John Raspani will be the co-host for Inside Boxing Daily from here on out. But for now, for Chris Shelton, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak. Do you see that Facebook issue that popped up?